How many of you consider yourself to be in a position of leadership, whether it be for work or otherwise? Just you could just use your hands up icon or wave in front of the camera for us. Hands up.
Phew.
And the second question is, what are the qualities of good leadership? You can type those qualities in the chat window or even turn your mic on briefly and just shout out a word or two. What are the qualities of good leadership? Catherine's opening up the chat window. Courage.
Yep.
Presence. Open, caring, and authentic.
Values,
Values.
strength.
Vulnerability.
Yeah. Willingness to make mistakes and own them. There we go.
Right. These are, so what are we describing? What is the common theme in all these superlatives we're using to describe leadership? It's by and large describing somebody that obviously cares, right? Cares about people. Those are relational comments. They all require someone else.
So right from the get-go, let's start by defining what we mean by real leadership. Real leadership requires wholehearted, meaning fully caring investment in people. Having the courage to legitimately care, because it does take courage. Human beings are hardwired to connect with each other, as we're going to talk about in much more detail tonight. And we do that through emotions. Our brains, bodies, minds are inseparable from the emotions that animate them. What motivates us or inhibits us has its roots in an emotional experience.
I love that line. Our brains, what did you say? Our brains, our bodies, and
Our
our minds are
minds are
inseparable
inseparable.
from the emotions that animate them. I like that.
That's good, Duane. I wrote that line.
Beautiful.
And our relationships with each other at work as well as at home are at the core of that emotional experience. So, for those of you who love research, and I know you're out there, we're just going to do a very quick sum of some of the research on the role of emotion in motivation and decision making. First of all, we make better decisions when thought is informed by feeling. This possibly goes against the grain of how we think about good decision making. We think about it as fact-based, logical decisions, that's the goal. But emotion actually plays a really important role in good decision making. And we know this partly by studying people whose brains are damaged in areas that govern emotion, right? So if your brain is damaged in an area that governs emotion, you can be assumed to be operating by logic only. And these people often make bad, overly risky decisions. So emotion is essential to be able to judge risk accurately and act to avoid too much risk, whether that's for yourself or whether that's for somebody else. And here is another important one. Emotions actually bias our perception, and they carry over from one situation into the next. So, for example, you have a fight with your spouse before you leave for work. You go into work and you are cranky and you are irritable, and then you get cranky and irritable at all the people around you, even though they had nothing to do with the original issue. It's a really simple example of what we're talking about. And on the positive end of that polarity, when you fall in love, everything is bright and shiny and wonderful, right? You're kind of predisposed to just smile on the whole world when you're in that
When
state.
you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you.
Uh-huh. And apart aside from the cheese.
When you're crying.
Aside from the cheesy song.
That's not a cheesy song.
It's kind of a cheesy
I
song.
like that song.
It's a little bit of a
I could
cheesy
sing the whole
song.
song.
The emotional state that you're in looks to prove itself, right? I'm in a state of irritability. I am looking to prove my irritability. I'm in this happy, glorious, glowing state. I am looking to prove that. And this is true even for what is referred to as unconscious feeling. So, emotions that we're not even aware of that are bubbling away inside of us.
For example, what does this say? What is the middle figure? B, obviously.
Obviously,
A,
B. There's
B,
no trick involved here.
A, B, and C. Are you sure about that? Actually, if you come from what determines the meaning of it? The meaning is determined by the context that you bring to it will give its meaning. Actually, it means nothing without context. So if you come from planet alphabet, you will see the letter B. Oh, there you are, B, come back home. You belong to us. If you come from planet numbers, you will see the number 13. We see what we are looking for. There really is no difference between perception and projection. And what we are looking for in terms of perception and relationships is more than what we project on them. It comes from these feelings we're talking about. If we're in a state of anger and fear, guess what we're going to be looking for in the relationship? If we're in a state of feeling safe, friendly, or caring, having a great day, guess what we're then going to be looking for? I remember a couple of years back in the month of November when I think we had about 30 days of rain every day, and suddenly the sun came out. And we live close to Capilano River here in North Vancouver. And I went for a walk on this trail by the river, and the sun was bursting through the trees. It was just a beautiful day, clean, clear air. It was wonderful. And I ran into this fellow that I've seen on the trail before, and I said, "Boy, it's a wonderful day, isn't it?" And he said, "Yeah, but it's not going to last. It's not going to last." Who was right? We both were. We both were. But we're both having a different view. Depending on what's going on inside of us is going to determine what we're going to find outside of us.
Emotions also influence depth of thought. So, fear and anxiety are emotional states that are associated with our fight flight response. Literally, what they're meant to do is get us the heck out of a dangerous situation, right? I am walking through the bush, out of the corner of my eye, I hear a little rustling, I kind of turn and I see some fur. My instant response is run very quickly away from the predator. Run, 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 right? Those two states, anger and fear, are associated with that response, and they're meant to get us really quickly away. So which that means that we are having an outer focus, we are really aware of our surroundings, and we make a really quick surface response based on instant judgment. On the other hand, when we feel safe, we're able to move completely into our internal experience, think more deeply and completely about a situation. We're not focused on the outside, we can go in. Last and hugely important point is emotions are social and relational. As I said earlier, we're hardwired for connection, and connection is key to using emotions powerfully and positively. Real vulnerable leadership is relational.
And when we think about communicating, we aren't thinking about emotion. We think about content and what we want to say. And thus the content message that comes out is thought out. And it's it's only 20% of actually what we're attempting to communicate. The 20, if I say, it's to the fellow on the trail, it's a beautiful day. The content message is it's a beautiful day. But that only comprises 20% of the total communication that's going on between two individuals whenever communication happens. 80% of the communication happens on an emotional level, and this is really, really key. We call this the relationship message. 80% of what's going on between two people when they're even talking about a hockey game or the weather is still a relationship message. And the relationship message is, how do I feel right now in this relationship? Doesn't mean I'm saying it, but it will be communicated non-verbally through tone of voice, body language, eye contact, no eye contact, and so on. And it's mostly non-verbal, but it's all about, how am I feeling right now in this relationship? Do I trust you? How close can I be? What do I think of you? What do I fear you're going to do to me? All of that is active and running. And the relationship message, folks, always, always overrides the content message. And it is a more powerful influence. When you leave a conversation with somebody, you are more prone to remember how you felt than actually what was said. And the real key in all this, to really understand how revolutionary this idea is, and its meaning and impact is, we cannot not communicate. That 80% that we think is just held inside our brains is running through everything, how we stand, how we look, our tone of voice, all of that's all nonverbal. The relationship message is always, always conveyed. There are no neutral moments. For example, when Catherine and I have a disagreement, ending normally with me apologizing, of course,
As it should.
and I close with, okay, all right, I'm sorry, okay? I'm sorry. With that hard tone, or I am sorry about that. With a soft tone, I'm saying pretty much exactly the same words, but the relationship message is profoundly different. And that whole idea, that formula, that understanding of psychology is actually mastered in drug commercials. I'm sure you've all seen them, where it's amazing what they get away with knowing this principle, because the 20% content message can be about, and often is, with dire warnings of possible death. Death! But the relationship message is packaged in soft and soothing music. Pictures of happy, relaxed people living the dream in the perfect relationship with the perfect family and the perfect dog and the perfect scenery, narrated by normally a gentle, caring voice, right? And that's what we are drawn. That's what I can have. I saw that in a cigarette commercial. I almost wanted to take up smoking.
Hey, what's wrong?
Nothing.
Life's full of hidden problems. So we hid a comforting brownie in a Snickers.
That's a Snickers commercial. Snickers commercial. I'm going to play that again,
Speaking
because you got to
truth.
see it's so short. We can see it again. Just watch this on terms of the content. What she says. He asks the question, "What's wrong?"
Hey, what's wrong?
Nothing.
Life's full of hidden problems. So we hid a comforting brownie in a Snickers.
And we are at our most powerful when our content and relationship messages actually match. When others can feel our message, not just hear those words. And this is true on both ends of the spectrum, both for the good and the bad. Successful, powerful, autocratic dictators they're not hiding anything about the relationship message and the content message. They're exactly the same. And the same goes for when somebody is in a total loving state. Their emotions, their body language match their words of being able to say, I love you, which I say to Catherine at least once a day.
So here is how we stereotypically think of leadership in the white Western hierarchical world. The one designated as in charge is on top of the hierarchy. That's the leader, right? In our stereotypical minds. But on a relational or emotional level, there is no hierarchy. at the most basic relationship communication human level, in that moment where we're sending and receiving those relationship messages, we all have influence and power. So your boss is as influenced by you as you are by them on an emotional level when you have a good interaction or when you have a difficult one. Now, this does not mean that the hierarchy doesn't grant privilege to those at the top. It absolutely does. Absolutely does. So your boss might be emotionally impacted by you and may also choose to use their positional power to avoid their own emotional discomfort. However, understanding this overriding influence of the relationship message and the importance that being congruent with the content is vital to real relationship. This is our power. We have influence all the time, and the medium of that influence is emotional. So life organizes itself around what we put into it, particularly on a relational level. The state of the world is a result of what we're each putting into it. The state of the world is a result of what we're each putting into it. So when you understand this relationship web that we all live in, you've tapped into your true power as an agent of change, whether that be for yourself, your family, or in service of others. You have a powerful influence. You are not strictly at the mercy of forces outside of yourself. You are a force, and you always have been. Again, this doesn't negate positional power imbalances. However, this is just about our human wiring, and at that level, every moment counts. Every interaction counts, no matter how small. All of it has an impact. And what we each put into these lines has created the world that we have. So my unloving, defended thoughts and feelings might not be as dramatic as a terrorist's, but the way that I convey those unloving and defended feelings through my actions in the relationship web, what I put into our collective system influences the whole, regardless. So we all have a responsibility to be the best self we're capable of being. And in so doing, we have the power to bring out the best in others as well. And here is just a glimpse into how life is organizing itself around what we put into it right now. The UN says that we have less than 12 years to turn the planet back from global warming. People are leaving their homes in a desperate search for safety. In many places in the world, women still aren't considered to be persons with rights. They're property. In our dinner table conversations about all of this, Duane and I have debated about what's happening globally and where we have come to within ourselves, for ourselves, is that we've been living in a very privileged little first world bubble, imagining that the connection that we have with other people we share this earth with is somehow optional and one way. And that isn't how it works. I think at some level, what appears to be chaos kind of erupting in our world is really that we're being inducted into the discomfort that most of the world is really familiar with. Really, really personally familiar with. Connection isn't an option and it isn't one way. We're constantly influencing and being influenced, and we cannot not communicate. These pictures, and I don't mean to be dark and depressing, but these pictures are just a tiny glimpse into the painful reality of where the human race is struggling. And we could keep going all night with these kind of pictures. Life is organizing itself around what we're all putting into it. We're being shown who we are as a whole species. the level of consciousness that we're actually operating from collectively as one human race. And no one is immune. No one is significantly more evolved. We're all part of it. And this is a shocking and uncomfortable thought. And that discomfort is really important. It's really important, particularly for those of us who have been living in comfort. It is really important that we allow ourselves to face that and not turn away from it.
And you can't change what you don't acknowledge. Our unwillingness to face uncomfortable truth hurts us. It hurts us personally and collectively to face what's going on inside of us. Pain, and there is so much of it in this world with trauma and isolation and depression. There's so much going on. Pain is cascading through the greater relationship web that we are all part of. When we are emotionally irresponsible with it, meaning unwilling to face that which makes us uncomfortable, we have to do something with it. So we contribute to that pain and spread it around. Spread it around with a blaming relationship message, and you may not even know you're doing it. As we said, we cannot not communicate. So we're trying to get rid of it all the time with these nonverbal languages or verbal, blatant or subtle, of who we're going to blame, and we inject that into the web. And we do that whether we're on planet fear or planet safety. Either one, we are spreading the good news or the bad news. So we feel uncomfortable and we try to alleviate that discomfort through irresponsible action or non-action into the web, just like the Snickers commercial. Right?
That's a tiny little innocuous moment, apparently.
But a very, very typical one. That can characterize a whole lot of conversations, a whole lot of the time, for a whole lot of people every day. The ways in which we avoid pain is how problems and dilemmas get amplified and grow into such huge, critical, divisive, polarizing situations, which, I don't even have to illustrate. And we want to evolve, and we need to evolve. But evolution isn't comfortable. It never is. One of my mentors told me years ago that all graduations are preceded by a crisis. We have to be willing to go through that discomfort and that crisis. So evolution isn't comfortable ever.
So in order to dive deeper into all of this, we have to start at the beginning of our human story. I said earlier, connection is quite literally the foundation on which we begin our lives. Our emotional network, which operates through our cortex and limbic system, gets established in about the first 6 months or so after birth, and that's part of the bonding process with our caregivers. We are wired to feel love and connection powerfully before we're wired to think. And perhaps even more accurately, we're wired through our emotions powerfully to respond in certain ways to those around us. The medium of relationship is emotion. It's not logic, it's not thought, it's feeling. Mirror neurons are key to this process on a neurological level, and this starts right from infancy.
So we're going to show you another video, which we have shown before in many lectures, but it is so pivotal to our teaching.
So this is an attachment theory-based experiment that's called the still face experiment by a lovely researcher called Ed Tronick. And it will show you, it's really simple, and I promise the child is not harmed in this experiment. Really simple. What the experimenter asks is for the mother to interact with the child in the way that they would naturally interact. And then when cued, just hold a still face for a couple of minutes. So not respond at all. So you'll see what happens in
And the
this.
interesting thing about this is almost pre-verbal, right? Or is pre-verbal, and so it's all relationship message. This is a child simply responding to the
This
relationship
is their early
message.
wiring.
In this still face experiment, what the mother did was she sits down and she's playing with her baby who's about a year of age.
I'm my good girl. Oh.
And she gives a greeting to the baby gives a greeting back to her.
Yeah.
This baby starts pointing at different places in the world, and the mother's trying to engage her and play with her. They're working to coordinate their emotions and their intentions, what they want to do in the world. And that's really what the baby is used to. And then we ask the mother to not respond to the baby. The baby very quickly picks up on this. And then she uses all of her abilities to try and get the mother back. She smiles at the mother. She points because she's used to the mother looking where she points. The baby puts both hands up in front of her and says, "What's happening here?" She makes that screechy sound at the mother, like, come on, why aren't we doing this? Even in this 2 minutes, when they don't get the normal reaction, they react with negative emotions, they turn away, they feel the stress of it, they actually may lose control of their posture because of the stress that they're experiencing.
Okay. I'm here. And what are you doing? Oh, yes. Oh, what a big girl.
Every time I watch that, I have different responses to it or new insights. There is actually very little difference between that child and us as adults. Our antenna and our radar is up just as much, picking up relationship messages and reacting inside, much like that child is, but mostly keeping it inside or covering it up and trying to avoid that discomfort inside of us. We as adults need that contact as much as that child does. It doesn't go away. Emotion, and you could see it in the child, is regulated through connection. Just as in that Tronic experiment, connection, seeing yourself being seen, hearing yourself being heard, and feeling yourself being felt is critical to gaining our sense of safety. And without safety, we will never have good perception of what's going on in front of us. We'll only be looking for danger.
Without safety, we'll never be able to think deeply about anything. We'll be bouncing off and making surface judgments.
And in survival mode most of the time. And in our awakening workshop, it's really quite profound to watch. Really, in truth, what we do is provide that experience of actually not just understanding this, but actually experiencing it, seeing yourself being seen, hearing yourself being heard, feeling yourself being felt, in a way that now becomes a new planet for you. Actually, it's an old planet. It's the one you came in with, but it's like returning to an old planet again. If you go from planet fear to planet safety, even having one spectacular experience of it can change your life forever. Because most of us have forgotten that we can have safety at that level. It's never too late. It's never too late. And the more you have that experience, the more you'll start looking for that experience, much like we look for what we fear now to stay, how we think we're going to be safe, is by being alone and being calculated and being strategic and being armored or being masked. We start looking to reinforce that. The same thing can happen with safety. If you have the experience, safety is achieved when we feel seen and responded to accurately, much like that child, accurately Here's my internal experience, and have it mirrored back to me. Somebody sees me, somebody knows me. We all still need that. Being seen requires being vulnerable when we feel vulnerable, where we feel vulnerable, rather than hiding behind that mask or being defensive.
When we have that experience, we end up having somewhere to go with our pain. And that's ultimately what we all need here. When we said there's pain cascading through our relationship webs, there's pain living inside of us. We need somewhere to go, that needs somewhere to resolve and process. And that ultimately is what our work is all about. A loving relationship message creates opening for new content. If a person doesn't feel seen and understood by you, doesn't feel cared about by you, they have no reason to listen to anything you have to say. No reason. Courageous conversations, the kind that take place inside and outside of therapy, have to start with a positive relationship foundation, a positive relationship message. I love you. You're important to me. I want to work this out. I want to understand. This is true in our intimate relationships, and it's true equally with people that you don't know. We've watched tons and tons of commentators, whether it's podcasts, television, talking about how a feeling of being disenfranchised is contributing to the polarized and entrenched arguments that are erupting in people's homes, on the news, on social media, everywhere. There are very few people discussing how to bridge that gap, how to extend empathy and understanding to another human being, even when they might be advocating for doing something you passionately disagree with, right? We talk in general about being kind. But how? How do we bridge that gap? We have to start by creating the safety necessary for pain and discomfort to come to the surface. And that's what happens when love is explicitly put into the mix. You can change what you acknowledge. You can change the discomfort that you are willing to face inside of yourself if you let yourself face it, if you let yourself feel it, as opposed to being emotionally irresponsible with it and just kind of projecting it out there and blaming somebody for it. Face it, feel it. Ultimately heal it, and take relational action based on fully appreciating the reality of what's in front of you instead of running with your projection. So I'd like to share a little personal story on this note. I went away this past weekend for what was supposed to be a light, fun wine tasting adventure with a whole group of friends. Now, coming into this thing that was supposed to be light and fun wine tasting adventure with all the group of friends, like many circles out there I'm aware of from my practice, and probably all of you have personal experience with as well, we were a group of mixed, some vaccinated, some not. So here I am. What is my ABC 12, 13, 14 situation that wants to arise based on my old relationship history in the middle of the current situation? I'm thinking about this thing that's supposed to be fun, and I'm thinking, well, crap. Well, crap. How am I just going to stick handle my way through this weekend without creating some kind of disturbance or upset that's going to crash and burn my relationships? And what I bring in that bubbles, the discomfort that bubbles up inside of me based on my own history, is certainly rooted in my early experiences as a kid with my friends. I was one of those kids on the school ground that never fit in with my group of friends. So I would kind of just very carefully find my way inside, and then I would do something that was apparently uncool, and I'd be booted out again. Very painful. And there's many complicating layers around that story that aren't as important to share with you tonight on this subject. But I'm aware of that, right? I am aware that I have this history. So, what we ended up doing as a very brave group of humans who love each other is we ended up sitting down on one of the afternoons and doing a circle up and a kind of clear mind style check in, very much like we would do at an awakening workshop. And when it came my turn to check in, I just started crying because it's been a really, really hard few years. The work that Duane and I do at Clear Mind is really, really close to our heart. And COVID, among many, many other things, has really thrown our company into some serious chaos. And in the middle of all that, inside of myself, I just almost could not face the possibility that I could also lose friends. And so I just started really crying and I said to everybody, the only thing that's important to me is that I get to hang on to my friends. The only thing that's important to me is that we continue to love each other. It doesn't really matter to me if we disagree, as long as we can continue to love each other anyway. And I asked my group for help to remember that relationships are solid and real, and that love is at the foundation of all of my important relationships. And we didn't agree, but we ended up having a very, very bonding experience. We had some light and fun, for sure we did, but we also had some deep and powerful and connective foundational relationship moments. To put this in the context of everything we've been talking about, it requires bringing more of yourself, and particularly your emotional self. Not your armored, defended, opinionated, logical, rational, here's all my arguments self, but your emotional being. And if you can put the 80% positive, loving relationship into message first and foremost, that foundation, the 20% can get worked out. The content can get worked out because you feel safe, because your brain can expand and see possibilities beyond just black, white, good or bad. Your brain can expand to allow for ambiguity and for nuance. And that's what's necessary if all of us are going to evolve. We need to get out of black and white, good, bad, fear-based, fight or flight thought. And one thing I know for sure is that love can heal any mess that humans make if we bring the mess fully, if we bring it fully, which requires acknowledging it, looking at it, exploring it, and ultimately doing something about it. Mm-hmm. So I feel very proud of my little circle of women. Actually, I shouldn't say little, big circle.
It was a big circle
of powerful women.
So we have no choice about whether we are connected, but we do have a choice about how we connect and what we're going to do with that connection, what we're going to fill those network of connections with. Those lines are always there. What are you going to put in them is the question. So we have been trying to impress upon you that connection there is not an option. Humanity is connected, whether you want to be or not. You are. Humanity is totally connected. And what we put into the mix affects the whole. pursuing our individual goals in life at the expense of others will never lead to happiness. It never has. It isn't currently. Because it can't lead to happiness because we're not just individuals. We're not. We're always in relationship. And there are no neutral moments. If you take anything away from this talk at all, and go into your life realizing there are no neutral moments, and you could be reflecting, asking yourself, what's going on inside of me? What am I putting out into the world in my relationship messages to those around me, my work, people I work with, people I live with, people I sleep with, people in my family? What am I putting into it? It's not neutral. It's not neutral. The state of the world is a result of what we are each putting into it. Now, the ingredients we each put into this collective mix determines the nature of the cake our human family takes out of the oven. So what you put into the system can and does have a profound impact, positive or negative, no matter how small the action. A butterfly flapping its wings in Japan is impacting the weather system in North America. It does. You do. With every flap of every one of your wings all day long. And real leadership means having the courage to inject into those network lines the courage to care, truly care, and truly look for a more accurate view of who everyone is rather than who you just fear them to be, to get on planet safety and start looking through that lens at everyone around you and express that care actively.